A very good morning to all the viewers of Detox, that is Disruptive Literacy Talks, where we have a motive of eradicating illiteracy and focusing upon foundational literacy and numeracy. We at Detox aims that education is for all because education is a continuous and a creative process. It aims to develop the capacities latent in human nature and to coordinate their expressions for enrichment and the progress of the society. And moreover, we believe in disrupting the status quo when best is not the enough. And moving on to today's session will be based upon literacy. And with this, I would like to introduce you with the speaker of the session, Mr. Robert Thorne, Director of Developing Real Learners, who will be speaking upon the topic learning to read or learning to learn, how a shift in our approach will bring the best of both. Robert is an international educator of 30 years experience. He is founding director of the hybrid organization developing real learners, the main function of which is to help school build learning communities, enable young people to become the best holistic learners they can be, and coach trainers, leaders, educators, parents, and the young people to develop holistic learner leveraging and the strengthening of both their culture and the humanity. Robert's message is one of the communities transforming themselves and their approach to education through accessible and straightforward processes that rely on our common humanity and their own culture perspectives. We at Detox are highly privileged to have you on the board, sir. Hello, sir. Welcome to Detox.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you. Okay, so a very strange thing happened the other day. I was in a talk with a university in Udaipur. That's right, and the vice chancellor of that institution was talking about young people and how nowadays even a very high scores in school leaving exams don't guarantee you for a good job. And I was just reflecting on something that, well, what about those who do get very high scores? And it made me think, are they the best people for the jobs that they want to take? Because what have they been doing? What have they done in order to become the toppers in the class? Obviously they have very good self-discipline and they're striving very hard, but are those the things that you want in the jobs that they go on to take to make social transformation happen, or to make things change? And I did a little bit of research and I found out that actually there has been some research into this and that they are not. They do go on to get quite good jobs generally, but they're not the ones who are driving change and making our societies what they should be. And then what about those ones who don't do so well? And it made me think of the question that I recently asked, I have been recently asking young people all over the world, and that is, what is school for? More precisely, I asked them, what should education really be doing for you? Okay, now this does bear some relation to literacy, but a slightly different sort of literacy than perhaps we've been used to hearing about. So, as I said, I've been in many different schools, and I've asked this in many different countries, and I've asked this very diverse cultures as well. And I've asked this question to people, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, since we are all human, I get surprisingly the same answers wherever I go, which is most encouraging, really. So we, in one place, the biggest of these studies was about 120 young people, teenagers from about 10 to about 18 years old. And we warmed them up a little bit so that they weren't going to give us the answers that they expected us, that they thought we wanted to hear, that they were going to give their answer from their heart. So we did quite a lot of warm-up sessions, building, relationship building, getting them used to answering these questions together as groups. So we took 120 people and we said, what do young people really need from education? And we did it on a sort of a think, pair, share type of thing. So they thought about it, wrote their answer, paired up, got an answer between the two of them, then four of them, then until we got to 120. And the answer that I'm getting from most groups in most places is something like this. We need education to maximize our chances of happiness and success in the future. And for that group, I said, oh, in the future, you don't want to be successful and happy now. And they said, no, of course we do. So wonderful. So we ended up with, we need education to maximize our chances of happiness and success now and in the future. So I've asked that, as I say, in different cultural contexts, and pretty much the same. Young people do want to be happy, and they do want to be successful. And then somebody said, what do you mean by happiness? And so we did a session on that. And I was quite surprised to find that even quite young teenagers could identify and had life experience of three stages of happiness, of the superficial happiness, of the happiness that you get when you engage in the flow of doing something. So you're engaging in something that's constructive, and something that gives you back something to you. And also the third type of being engaged in something, but being part of a larger group. So whether that's the family, being recognized as an important part, a part with a voice, of being in either a family or a group or a team or part of a school. And most children have experienced that. Some of them have experienced a lack of that too, which was sad. Then we looked at success, and I think the best answer to what is success was being able to be happy for most of one's life. I think that's great because it takes out the money part, it takes out the scrabbling to get to the top of the greasy pole, it takes that out. The focus is on managing to be happy at the highest level of happiness you can be. And I think what I noticed was that really resonates with what a lot of people feel around the world, but especially in India. And I think in India we have a wonderful foundation to really make that happen. So we know, for me anyway, I understood what young people really want from education, and then I went to adults, and so teachers, parents, anybody I could get my hands on. I also asked young people too, but mainly adults, and I said to them, what characteristics, what I call them attributes, so that skills, dispositions, do you think young people need to be happy and successful these days? And it's funny, you get a group of teachers especially together and you ask that question, and then they say, oh, well, suddenly they switch into human mode. They are no longer teachers, they are parents, they are brothers and sisters, they're grandparents, some of them. And they start to say things like, well, young people need to be curious, they need to be collaborative, they need to be to go out there and do things. They need to be open-minded, much more than we were, perhaps. They need to be able to think and to be knowledgeable. They need to be entrepreneurial. They need to have balance in their lives. And they come out with all these wonderful attributes. In different cultures, they sometimes express them differently, but when you boil it down, they come into probably around 14 different categories. Now, some of you may, if you know about the International Baccalaureate, you may say, well, wait a minute, some of those sounded like the International Baccalaureate's learner profile attributes, and that's true. I spent some time with that. So I began to recognize these categories. One of them, for example, one of the most important ones was having empathy, being caring about things, and also being determined. And we put that into something I call heart-minded, which is So we've got open-minded, growth-minded, we've got heart-mindedness now. And heart-mindedness is having empathy and caring enough to get to the heart of an issue. Okay, so it's things like that. So we asked adults about this. They came out in societies as diverse as Japan, Mozambique, Germany, Lebanon, Iran, Pakistan, India, and people come out with the same things. Quite amazing. And then I turn to the adults in the room and I say, well, who teaches these things? And there's a silence, usually. And sometimes good teachers will recognize that they do teach these things, but quite intrinsically. But many teachers say, well, that's crazy. We don't teach these things, really. We don't specifically, explicitly teach these things. So why not? So, the funny thing, if you go to a bookshop, or if you go online to an online bookseller, and you look up any of these things, being collaborative, being open-minded, being curiosity, those things, you will find a book on it written by someone who is telling you that to be successful in life or in business, you need to develop this attribute. So we know that it's really important. We know it in our hearts. We know it. The business gurus, the lifestyle gurus are all telling us these things are important. And yet, when we get to school, these things are usually the last thing that are developed. And they're certainly not developed explicitly. And we need to develop them explicitly. And this is where the literacy part comes in. So, yes, of course, children need to read. They need to be able to read. More than that, well, is it more than that? They need to want to. They need to want to learn to want to read. They need to want to read. Reading is not necessarily a natural thing. And so they need to be able to enjoy communicating and expressing themselves through reading and through writing from an early age, and to become good at it, so good at it that they don't suffer the frustrations of not being able to express themselves and not being able to understand others when they express themselves. However, we're seeing now other sorts of literacy coming in. Obviously, there's the old one of numeracy, which is literacy with numbers, for those of you who believe maths is a language. But there's also literacy of technology, being technologically or something slightly different, literate with information. And so that's something that's coming in, or not coming in, but it's becoming more important in our lives, perhaps. But then there is the literacy, a much older thing, and I think India has some good lessons for the rest of the world on this, and that is the literacy of understanding oneself as a learner. To be able to understand, identify, and understand oneself as a learner. So where does curiosity lie within me? How do I describe my development as a curious inquirer? Where does collaboration lie within me? Am I someone who can get the best out of others and give my best to a group? If I'm not, how can I make that work? How can I make that change? Now, the good news is that we can, so at the end of the session with the teachers, and they're all like, no, we don't teach these things because we're teaching subjects. I say to them, if I could show you a way to both teach your subjects and to teach these young people these attributes, would you be interested to know? And they all go, yes, we would. And so then we do, and then the classes change, roles change. Very often teachers suddenly are relieved of the burden of having to teach subjects to children, and instead help children to develop in the context of subjects. Some schools, of course, have the luxury of being able to kick out subjects completely and just go on project-based learning. And maybe we're moving that way, and that's fine. But in the meantime, when for us, those of us who are stuck with syllabi and curriculum, where we're told we have to teach in subjects, and for those of us who are used to teaching in subjects, then we need to focus not on the subject so much, but on developing the learner within the subject. And there are a mass of techniques, strategies, micro techniques that we can help to turn around the classroom. You can go online and just type it in and say, how do I develop curiosity? And you'll find something that tells you how to develop curiosity. And when you do that, you build it into your lesson, and there you are. It's very easy. And the wonderful thing in this paradigm shift of teaching children rather than subjects and developing learner attributes is not an expensive change to make. Yes, you have to switch people on to make that change, to be aware of that change. But once you do, then we can see the development of perhaps communities in the school. So schools as learning communities. We can see this happening within schools as teachers work with other teachers, as learners help teachers to create this, what I call learner development-centered approach to education. And I touched upon, so my last point here, before we perhaps go to questions, my last point here is about the community. And what I'm finding, so I said some good things about India, but there are some things which I do see in other countries, but I've seen it recently in India quite a lot, and that is school communities not having high levels of trust, communication, and collaboration. Now, what I mean by trust is, I'm not saying that when you go in, people might steal your things or something like that. What I mean is the trust that a leader gives to their staff, that I trust you to do a job well, or the trust that a teacher has for their young people. I trust you to go about learning well, to do the activities that we're talking about. I trust you to come up with the answers, rather than the leader telling people what to do and putting monitoring systems in place, which take up all the leadership time, and just breeds a lack of trust in school. And in the classroom, the teacher is answering the question, is telling the children what to do, is directing them, so they never develop this feeling of responsibility for their role. So we need to create communities where levels of trust are high, levels of communication are high and effective, levels of collaboration are high, and high enough in order to be able to create a shared vision, an operational vision for the school that you're in. Same goes for other institutions like universities. And when we have this vision, then people begin to recognize their roles in that vision, in achieving that vision. And once they've recognized their roles, then they can be encouraged by the leadership teams and by each other to fulfill those roles. So they gain a sort of professional capital, professional responsibility, if you like. And then young people and non-teaching staff and parents who are involved as well begin to see their role in creating a learning community and in developing holistic learners for life. And when you have that, they then support the teachers, and then the teachers support the leadership, and things are beginning to work well. And people begin to see each other as resources for making things work, of achieving the vision. And what I'm seeing, though, is a high degree of competitiveness, and when you get competition like that, there are the people who are winning, and then the rest of the people who are losing. I'm seeing people, I know there's tough times, but I'm seeing people afraid about their jobs. But then, being treated quite poorly about that as well. Even before that, one of the first questions I asked when first being offered a job in India was about the regularity of pay. And it seems that many teachers suffer from having irregular pay. And it's not good. So there's some very big things that need to happen in many schools. If we get the environment right, if we get the community right, then we can begin to develop the learner. And so I'm just going to finish now, so we have time for questions. Just want to say something about the NEP. I think it's a wonderful document. It's great. There are some things I'm sure people disagree with, but there's one statement in that document that I think gives us the go-ahead. It says the people who are in charge of education, have responsibility for education in India, they are saying this to us. And it's a wonderful statement. Let me read it to you. Learning will be holistic, integrated, engaging, and enjoyable. So my question and my invitation to all of you is to ask this question of yourself. Is what I'm doing, or is what we are doing as a group, is what we're doing helping our young people not only develop as learners, but become able to develop themselves as holistic learners for life as well as for school? Okay, that has to start in preschool. So the literacy teacher needs to be looking, I am teaching reading and writing, but am I also, as I'm doing that, the way that I am doing that, am I helping this child to understand the importance of working with others well, of asking questions, of making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, and all of those other attributes that I'm very happy to share with you at a later date. Okay, so that was a long spiel from me. So I'll pass you back to Mr. Tanmay, and I'm happy to answer his questions and any others.
Yes, sir. You gave very insightful thoughts to us upon literacy and education. My first question to you would be, like, I was listening to you, and what are your views if we make literacy a public mission, a public campaign, that every person is teaching one person?
Okay.
Like, if I am a literate, I am an educated person, I can make literate an underprivileged adult, or out of the school children. If one person takes one, we can achieve the goals of making people literate in
Yeah,
coming years. So what are your views on that?
I think that's a very noble thing to aspire to. Obviously, there are some, as a principal and who's used to looking after the safety of children, obviously there's a safety issue there, because as a teacher, you're somewhat vetted as are you a person who's fit to be with children and to look after children. So you have to be careful about that sort of thing. But no, that's wonderful. I think for any implementation of any policy or change, or initiative like the one you have, the first thing is, do people understand where we're going with this? Now, of course, if somebody just teaches somebody to read in whatever manner, that's obviously going to be quite a good thing. The more they understand how to do that, and how to do that in a way that, I suppose the easiest way to think about it is in the way a guru might help you. So bringing that reading and that wanting to read and the skills of reading and writing, bringing them out of the child so that child actually gets the responsibility of reading and writing. I know that I'm not a preschool specialist, so forgive me if you are a preschool specialist and you say, oh, you can't do that with young learners. But I think you can. It's the way that good parents bring up their children to read. And so, yes, if it's done in a really good way, and everybody does it with good heart, I think it's got to be a great thing. And not just literacy. I think there's many things. I'd love to see schools helping other schools. And I think I saw one example of that recently that was fantastic. But let's see what your other questions bring.
Yeah, I would like to ask all the audience that while we are moving up with the questions, I would ask you to please share your thoughts and questions in the live comment section of Facebook and YouTube as well. Moving on further, sir, what are the fundamental premises for learning to read in order to read to learn?
Okay, so that's all about literacy, and it's all about empowerment, because obviously when you learn to read, for example, you gain a certain power in your life. You're now able not to have to depend on somebody reading for you. You can access information. The same with numeracy. You have the power over numbers. You can manage those things yourself, and that makes you, it gives you confidence in life. Sorry. And I think we need the same thing with ourselves. We need a literacy of ourselves. And so literacy to read. So reading, obviously, is a way that you can then go and find out more about yourself. You can go and find out about what is curiosity, what is collaboration, what is it to be a good inquirer, what does it mean to have a good balance in life. And so reading to learn, obviously you need to read to be able to learn more things rather than just relying on YouTube. Mind you, many of us have just been doing that. So learning to read to learn, yeah, these two things sort of go together if we're going to empower someone to become a self-directed and independent learner in life.
Yes, sir. And sir, how can the current curriculum could be improved in order to accelerate the foundational literacy and numeracy skills in a person?
Okay, all right. Well, that is quite a difficult question for me to answer, because I don't know what the current preschool literacy syllabus is. So I will say one thing though. How do you? And it may give literacy experts an idea. So when I've looked before at curriculum, syllabus, especially syllabus. For example, here in Turkey, we were looking at the Turkish curriculum, syllabus for science many years ago. And we ended up with this syllabus, and it just said like the atom. Students will learn about the atom and the photosynthesis and things like this. And all we just did one really simple thing, is that we changed everything into questions. So what is an atom? What does photosynthesis do, and what impact does it have? So we changed everything into questions, cut it up into small pieces, and gave it to the children. And I have done this before in giving the children just the statements of a syllabus, and they look and they go, oh, okay. But giving them the questions, they're like, oh, look, wow, that's an interesting question. And they start to come up with their own questions. Okay, so suddenly they have ownership of these questions. These questions are inside them, and they know what's coming up, and they can go and look the questions up themselves. Maybe they don't need me to teach them those things. Then we can do something more interesting, actually using the information rather than just learning about it. So if there is an equivalence of that in the literacy world of preschool, then that would be great.
Yes, because preschools is the stepping stone for for the
Mm.
children to get into the education and the literacy. So
Yes.
yes, we
Could
could
I?
think of some. Yes, sir. You were
Yeah.
saying something.
Yes. Could I just say one thing?
Sure, sir. Sure.
Edu- um, parents and preschool educators really need to think, and I assumed that they did, but then I began to see that it's not the case everywhere. That young people are born learners, and it's what we need to do so that they're born learners for the natural world, and we live in the constructed world. We live in the world of cultures and language and technology and all those things. So what we have to do is take these natural learners and we need to nurture their natural learning attributes to be able to use them in the constructed world. Now, what happens very often, and it's not so much in many of the primary uh, areas, but it's more in perhaps in the middle school. But what happens is that these attributes are suppressed in order to get compliance. And to get compliance, uh, we begin to lose the curiosity and even the collaboration and all that sort of thing. It all sort of disappears. And I know that, I'm saying that as somebody who's taught some quite small classes. I know there are people out there with huge classes. There are ways. I was talking to a friend recently, Dr. Paul Lowe, who has techniques for managing what I'm talking about in very large classes. So children get into groups, and suddenly there's groups, and there's a whole theory to it. So it's possible. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. And what do you think that what could be the approach of Indian schools focusing their shifts to focus upon learning to learn rather than just reading it out?
Absolutely. I think this comes back to policy change as well. And you've had some sort of disasters with policy change before. I know the CCE, for example, was didn't really work because I think it was not managed well, or for whatever reasons. So what you have to do. So first thing, when you're going to introduce something new to people, you have to get them to work with it. So you can't impose a policy on people. You have to get them to be taking the policy on for themselves. Okay, and one of the wonderful things about the NEP is that it recognizes that. I can't remember what the statement is, but it says teachers. Oh, that's right. Teachers are central to this change, and that's very, very. And I hope that schools recognize that teachers. But I would also go further as to say the young people themselves, the non-teaching staff, the parents who can be involved. These people need to understand. They need to understand what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, that it's going to be okay, that if you have someone who's developed from primary age to become the best learner they can be, that they can cope very well to the best of their ability with any exams that anyone throws at them, with driving tests, uh, with also with human relationships, with family, with family problems, because they know how to adapt their learning to any situation. Okay, so I forget what the question was now. What was the question? Did I answer the question in all of that?
Yes, sir, surely. And now,
Okay.
moving on, Global Dream uses the pedagogy of learning to learn rather than learning to read. with our specified learning literacy toolkits. And with this, I would like to show you our toolkits. The literacy material, we call it toolkits.
Okay.
Yeah. So here it is. You can see the toolkits on the screen. The toolkit, that's an English toolkit. So
Oh, yeah.
basically, this is a part of Global Dream Foundational Literacy and Numeracy 30 hours approach.
Mm,
We tell that we can make an unliterate person literate in just 1 month, in just 30 hours of education,
wonderful.
which we think is a path breaking idea. We
Yeah.
work on the power of sound as well as the pictorial representations.
Hmm.
And for teaching an underprivileged adult or an out of the school children, one should not be a teacher to teach from this toolkit. A school going child can also teach his known ones to make them literate. Like you can see on the screen that there are three pictures represented over here. Like one is violin, the other one is apple, and the third one is the nest. So
Mm,
our motive is to ask, wait, and don't tell, so that let the student or the learner answer,
great. That's
which will
fantastic.
initially
Yeah.
uh, help in uh, building them in a confidence.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So everything I've said is exactly what you're doing. You're developing the learner, and then so what is the learner doing? The learner is learning to read, and so it's putting the learner first, the development of the learner first.
So
Exactly.
basically,
Perfect.
he's learning to learn. Like we ask a child
Yeah.
or an underprivileged adult that what you can see in the picture. So he will
Mm,
say that I can see a violin. So we will ask him that please tell us the first sound of violin. So
mhm.
he will say violin's first sound is V. We'll say very good. And now tell what's the first sound of apple. So he will say that first sound of apple is A.
Mhm.
Apple A. So then he will say, I'll ask him, or the teacher will ask him or her that what is the first sound of nest. So he will say na. So now we'll ask him just collaborate these three sounds and see what a word comes out of it. So he will
Mhm.
say ver and van.
Mhm.
So now
Right.
he learned a new word out of three images. So we work on the existing knowledge of the person. Not we give him like A for apple, B for ball. No, we try to work on their existing knowledge. We try to get them learn new things out of their existing knowledge. Like violin's first sound ver, apple's first sound a, and nest's first sound is na. So va and a combines and makes van. Similarly, car's first sound is ka, apple's first sound is a, and tap's first sound is t. So cat.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. Very good.
So with
And
this, basically, we try to indulge the people, indulge the children, so that this we feel is an interesting idea to make them coming towards literacy.
mm, yes, very good. And is that just for English or is it for other languages?
So these toolkits have been replicated into 13 different Indian languages, such as
Wonderful.
English, Hindi, Marathi,
Hmm.
Manipuri, Tamil, and also in two foreign languages, that is Swahili and Spanish.
Oh, really? Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
That's
sir.
great because yes. And is this idea coming out of India?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. That's in the future, not too distant future. What I see is Indian educators going out into the world and helping other people with their education and their approach to education. I think that's going to happen very soon. So, well, obviously, it's happening already with you guys. So, very good. Yeah.
And with this, I would like to invite Dr. Sunita Gandhi, the lead worker at Global Dream Literacy Initiative, to in the session as a discussant.
Wonderful.
Welcome, ma'am. Welcome to Detox as a discussant of the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanmay. And it's delightful to be hearing Robert Thorne talk about literacy and education. And it's a real pleasure to hear all the right kind of sound bites. They sort of ring such a bell with an educator. I have been in the trenches working with the people in the uttermost poverty as well as children and adults who are working, in regular schools. I'd say the budget private and private schools. My family runs one of them. It's called City Montessori School, and that's in Lucknow. It's the world's largest school and also the recipient of the UNESCO Prize for Peace Education. So, twice India has got that, once with Mother Teresa and then second time, and the only school to have got that recognition as a peace worker. And I think that's also very significant because, how do we get children to become thinkers, and how do we get them to become consciously acting people, proactive agents of social transformation, something that comes from within, aspirational goals and all that. We're going to sit them in a classroom and dummify them. So, and I think we are dummifying them, and you alluded to that with your thought processes that you shared. I really sort of echo with you on this idea of natural learning attributes of the children, and how when in middle school they're put to just listen and do as told, we're actually holding back human potential. And not just that, we are kind of damaging a better future, because these kids would come out and make massive contribution if they were just taught not to just listen and do, but to create, co-create, and solve problems. And they certainly are capable of, especially at this age. If you look at what Dr. Maria Montessori said, she said this is an age of idealism. And and she connected it to Mussolini having frontline warriors as youth. In our Iraq war, the frontline warriors were our youth, because youth are idealistic, and their idealism can be turned in any whichever way. So obviously, the education has to go through a very dramatic turnaround, and not just small little changes at the margins, which are, like lighter school bags, or let's change a little bit of the syllabus, or something of that nature. Because this whole blueprint approach of syllabus is also very damaging. You alluded to the fact that the principals, as many decision makers or policy makers, and superintendents of schools, as well as the government policies, to some extent, are gatekeepers to the old and the established. And there's no way to break out of the old unless freedom is given to the teacher. And the teacher is able to experiment with new ideas, because every day the teacher is witnessing a new need. And when they're witnessing this new need, they're able to find solutions to it if they're allowed to think for themselves. And if the teachers are not being allowed to think for themselves, then what's happening with the children? They're definitely not being allowed to think for themselves. So there's a greater loss that's going on. And there are people who are trying out new ideas. I certainly am one of them. I'm doing a lot of dramatically different things, where basically, as you have seen, and the teachers I'm working with are sort of coming along with this idea that every teacher should be a researcher. And so what they're doing, like in one school community that I'm directing, it's called City International School here in Lucknow, where I'm based. And there, every single teacher is engaged in research. So what research? I mean, it's very simple. Like whatever you're going to teach, think of a better way of teaching it. And, your thing about ask questions first, or turn everything around into questions. And this is something actually we are trying out, because I feel that children have a natural curiosity, and don't teach them, ask them. So basically, our principle is ask, wait, don't tell, or in fact, go meditate. So
Very good.
ask, wait, go meditate. Just don't interfere with these children's learning. And just put the setting there, okay, today, we're going to do a project on X, Y. Even that, why do you have to tell which project? Let the kids come up with their own projects.
Exactly.
So let's be problem solvers in the real sense. And really, it is a mini-max approach, because it minimizes a teacher's work and maximizes learning. Group work, paired work, you alluded to a friend of yours who has been working with large classrooms and doing group work. Well, we've been trying that as well, and I love to compare notes with him, and it'd be good to talk to him at some point if you refer me to him. And so basically, I mean, we need to take an experimental approach. We need to be circumspect about current education. We need to allow the teachers maximum ability to go do what they need to do. Now, some teachers will take advantage of that possibly, but we are at a greater loss of trust, as you mentioned earlier also. We're going to lose trust, and that is a bigger loss. So trust must be there. We trust the teachers, and in any case, there's so many visual and beautiful ways to see where the teachers need any kind of guidance. Further, ways to intrinsically motivate them rather than extrinsically control them. So those are all more becoming ways of handling the future in education. We've taken an experimental approach to literacy. You were saying who invented this and what happened here. Is it from India or is it from abroad? Well, actually, the thing is that we're like scientists. I came back to India in 2014. I took charge of Devi Sansthan, which is an NGO that I started many years prior to that, while I was working at the World Bank as an economist. So my own background happens to be education in physics, my doctorate in physics, but work as economist. So, I mean, that's also possible. Many, many children can do that. Why do we stop them from thinking that? Why careers? Why again blueprints approach to the future? So, and why not teach the core skills that allow you to change careers, do the next right thing for you and for society? And then what career guidance to give? That is another very big issue and I'd love to have your thoughts on that career guidance part as well. But just quickly to answer your query about who did it. Well, basically what happened when I came back to India, and I was really feeling I wanted to do something for the illiterate masses, the underprivileged. And there were three problems. One, that whenever I went to the government said, oh, there isn't a problem really. I mean, or it'll solve by itself. That was the second point, that it'll peter away. It'll through attrition, people will get older and there'll be no more the illiterate. Brutal cutthroat approach. Then I noticed also that it took way too long. So I thought to myself, well, okay, let me I didn't have the primers in my hands, or I didn't look at what was going on. I just said, let's start afresh, like a drawing board approach, and bring illiterate people to my office and we'll try different things with them. And because I was, in this frenzy of I have to solve this. And I often find that when we ask difficult questions, we come up with the right answers. So my difficult questions were can a completely illiterate person who doesn't know a single letter become capable of reading a newspaper in just 1 month?
Wow.
Number one. Number two, can they do that with just 15 minutes of time commitment per day? Because their reality is such that they are more busy than us. We have options. They don't. They have to feed their families.
Yes.
Very vulnerable on time. So why not something in 15 minutes? And three, can you teach anytime, anywhere? Or anyone can teach. So that would mean that you're passing by a pan shop and you stop and you teach somebody for 10 minutes and you move on. So every day you stop by that way and you teach somebody. So it can be anybody, anywhere, anyone, any child can also teach. And that was the other challenge. How can the children teach? Because they are a force. And this connects to your point that you made about middle school children, that we're not using the attributes. And their attribute, they want to go do these things, actually.
Yeah. And they learn so much from it.
They learn so much from it. And of course, there's ample evidence, especially from the US on service learning, that when children are doing real life connections in their projects, that they are transforming in a million ways. I mean, there's less of problems in the school, like less absenteeism, less of children who are bullies, more academic focus, more respect for the teacher. You see that, and you also see academic improvement. Now, if you were very selfish, and because a lot of schools in India are so gung-ho and focused on academic improvement, that they actually do a very shoddy job of that as well.
Yes. And also, if I can just interject there.
Yeah, Robert, please, absolutely.
I had two students, I'll call them students because they really were students, in Syria, so not very far from where we are at the moment, many years ago. And they were straight A's all the way up from primary school, and they were heading for the top universities in America, MIT and Harvard. But I did some research. I was quite young then. I did some research on how to get into MIT and how to get into Harvard, and they were saying, they were just beginning to say then that we're getting so many people with top grades that it's hard to distinguish who can come to the university. So we're beginning to look at other things. What has the learner achieved? What are they going to contribute to our university when they come? What are they going to contribute to the community of our university? And then go on to be able to do, so we can say, look, that famous person is from our university. So they started looking at more of a portfolio type of thing. And I think this is the way that we've got to go. And so it took a lot for their English teacher and for me as their physics teacher, there's another one, to convince these two that they had to do more than just study what was on the syllabus and do more than just getting straight A's if they wanted to get into Harvard and MIT. I don't know how much the difference we made had, because they were really brilliant students, but they started to look at poetry. They started to, which is quite a communal thing in Syria. You do it in groups, and they started to look at service and put more of their efforts into those things to build up like a portfolio that they could send to, and they got full scholarships to both of those institutions, and had the luxury of choosing which one they wanted to go into. And they went on, and when they came back, they said, "Thank you so much for helping us see more than just the subjects we were going for, because when we got there, we actually had a really wonderful time. We got involved with the community. So this one boy who was studying structural engineering, he actually headed the poetry group of the college. So it's fantastic things. So it works both ways, really."
Yes, indeed. I have a personal experience of that, also adopting a child at 13 months of age from a slum.
Wow.
And this year she's studying at Harvard.
Yeah.
So, and that's just her doing, but giving them an aspirational environment, giving them opportunity to learn a variety of things, actively participate in things, but mostly giving them an aspirational environment, because she took on all sorts of leadership roles on her own. And she plays the guitar, the ukulele, and she's just a remarkable human being. She's served in all sorts of committees now in the US and all that, and got into Harvard on her own, everything on her own. And I think that is something they can do.
Yeah. And this is something I'm seeing in India as I'm speaking with more and more Indian principals. I'm seeing that when we start to talk developing these attributes, and some people are talking about emotional intelligence and all those things, they're saying, "Oh, we'll have a class on this. We'll put it in a special course on it, or we'll relegate it to, or it is already relegated to something that may happen in extracurricular activities." And that really makes me very sad, because these are things that we need to build into what we're doing very much. And it's it can't be separated like that. We've already seen in Britain anyway, we saw skills education. The children were very good at skills education, but they didn't take them. They didn't employ them in their work, in their learning. So what we have to do is not be additive. Sometimes we mustn't add more things, but sometimes we need to subtract things. So, for example, to develop curiosity, somebody was saying, "How do you develop curiosity? What have I got to do as a teacher to help that child develop curiosity?" Well, sometimes you need to step back and give the child the space in which to ask questions, and the trust, the environment of trust, to be able to know that they can ask questions safely, so that their classmates will go, "Wow, that's a funny question," or "That's an interesting question," but not "That's a stupid question." So there's a subtractive part of it as well. You need to step back and not.
I think that this thing about stepping back. Sorry, please complete.
Oh, go ahead. No, that's fine.
Okay. So this stepping back is really critical, because actually that's what we need to do, is take one more time a stock of what we are doing, why we're doing in the first place, and what are we trying to accomplish. What is the purpose of life? even that. I think we need to go back to the drawing board with a lot of these fresh questions, and I think we'll transform education in a million ways. And why not allow every teacher to be a researcher, because they can create the successes on everyday basis and bigger ones. I mean, if Dr. Maria Montessori could become a worldwide phenomenon, is because she was a researcher, because she observed the children and she
Right.
learned from them and created environments that were more suitable for them by learning from the children what they like and don't like and what they do and where they learn, how they learn. I think that if teachers became researchers, we would have a renaissance in education across the world. What are your thoughts?
I do think tied into that, we have to be a little bit careful because we have a very big range of teachers or people who are in the teaching profession. There are people who have, for their whole profession, they're coming towards the end of their profession, and all they have known is to stand in front of the children and teach them. Now, maybe they are also, I'm sure, as humans, they are also doing a lot of very good things for their kids on the side. So they're helping the children. They're being a good role model in many ways, in different ways, perhaps. So there are those saying, but how can I now change what I'm doing? You know, I've still got 5 more years of my service left. How can I change? All these changes are going to, you know, they're going to get rid of me because I'm a dinosaur. And then there are the young teachers who are in teaching because there was nothing else to do, or that's the only job, and they don't particularly want to be there, and they don't feel comfortable in the job that they're doing. And that's where I see principals having. Yeah, we can blame principals for a lot of things, but I can see there is a point when the principals say, but I can't trust my teachers to make these changes. And so the principal has to become like the teacher of the staff, but the teacher that we're talking about, not the teacher that those teachers are. They have to guide and be the guru, if you like, asking the right questions, letting the teachers make mistakes, letting them understand that if a mistake is made, it's not the end of the world, it's fine. Getting rid of blame from the school, just getting rid of it and saying, okay, something has happened. Now that's okay, let's fix the problem. What can we do to learn from this? And including those people who find change very difficult, as long as they're pointing in the right direction, as long as you can ask them, do you agree with the vision that young people should become the best holistic learners they should be, are good learners for life? And if that teacher says, yes, I really believe that, and in my teaching of mathematics or whatever, I want them to do that, then that's enough. That's fine. That is fine. If you have 1 or 2 or 3 teachers like that, but all the rest are developing these learners, it's okay to have 1 or 2 teachers like that. So I'd like to see the transformation of schools in India an inclusive one, because then you develop the trust in the community, and then those people will open out because they have the lifetime experience. The young people will begin to see the potential in this career that they thought was just becoming a lecturer in a subject that they might not be very confident about expressing themselves in. But when they realize that it's about helping young people grow these natural things that they have also grown, and growing together, so the teacher and the kids exchange roles sometimes in leading the learning, then we're okay. And I know, you know, Montessori and some of the other great schools like that, great systems like that, they have thought about these things already. But we've got to get them all the way through. We've got to get this into people's minds. We're not suddenly switching off in grade 10 and because we've got exams. We're still going to employ our learner attributes to do those exams as well as possible, or to do that driving test as well as possible. Okay, I'm going to engage my knowledge, my ability to develop my knowledge there. So we're not throwing it away. We're not throwing sort of knowledge and learning like that away. Knowledge and recalling knowledge away. That's a great skill to have. but we've got to develop these other skills and these other dispositions as well. So, sorry, I'm starting my speech again.
No, it's very, very powerful. And I think one of the points that you made, of course, there's all powerful points, that the belief system, because obviously all change comes from there. So any kind of training or orientation of the teachers or guiding the teachers goes to waste unless their belief system matches with the vision. And then who decides the vision becomes an issue, but it can be collective exercise the best. But nevertheless, the fact is that the belief system is the key thing, and you really hit on it. I should think, Any final concluding comments you'd like to make? We've had 1 hour of discussion. I think our audience must be getting a bit antsy. So, what would you like to make some final comments? Are there any questions that you'd like to ask from the audience, if any?
Ma'am, I have a question for both of you, if you allow me to ask.
Surely, go ahead. Ask Sir first.
Yeah. What are your views on learning to read and reading to learn? How should it occur? Like simultaneously or continually throughout a child's elementary and their secondary years of education? I would like to ask this question to Robert sir and then Sunita ma'am.
Okay. So, well, number one, you have no choice in one of them. There is a choice whether to teach someone to read or not, but there is no choice in that child learning and learning to learn through their lives. Now, what is a question is how well they learn to help them with. So, we're born learners. And you might think, when I speak to my mother sometimes, who's in her 80s, she says, oh, I can't learn these things anymore. But she's still a learner. She's still learning from her daily experience about things. She's still adjusting her behavior due to something that's happened. So we are always learners. We must, while we're adopting things like reading, in order to become better learners, we need to do that in a way that develops those other learner attributes, so that we become good at and explicit at developing as learners, not just leaving it to chance. That's my answer.
Fabulous. I think the answer is beautiful. And obviously, maybe the direction needs to be the first you learn to read, and then you're such a good reader that you read to learn. So basically, how to get people up to speed with getting to the point that they're reading well. And yesterday we had a fantastic presentation, and I would actually love to have Robert's views on it. But it was Mary McCool Berry from the US. She's been a teacher all her life, now retired. And she has created an English literacy program, which she's running there. We were comparing notes and such. And she said that, the whole of United States of America and many parts of the world have been afflicted because of this whole concept or notion of whole language learning. And that doesn't work and it's held back humanity. So we think that if we put more books in the library or put more books in the bag of the child or whichever way, that somehow reading will be more or better or more comprehension. What are your views on that? And then we end on that. I don't need to comment back after that if there's not a burning desire in me at that time. And then you can take the stage after Robert. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not an expert with language learning, but yeah, it sounds right. Yeah, we've got to be explicit about what we are doing. We can't leave things to chance, like just having lots of things there lots of resources in order to, just because you have a library doesn't mean to say you're going to use it. And also, especially with foreign languages or second or third languages, that the fluency as well, aiming for this mastery of languages. So I haven't mastered any languages, almost not even my own, but I can speak in 4 or 5 languages in order to communicate with people. But not with fluency. Now, I did that on my own. I didn't get that from school. So I'm not really sure about whole language approaches and that. But yeah, we have to be careful which approach we take.
Yes, sir. That was a really good session by you, sir, and Sunita ma'am, you as well. And with this, we move to the end of the session of detox. This session of detox, and to learn more about Global Dreams 30-hour foundational literacy and numeracy approach, log into www.globaldream.guru. Or you can also WhatsApp us at 740-840-6000. With this, I would like to thank Mr. Robert for coming onto our session and telling us such wonderful things. And also, I would like to thank Dr. Sunita Gandhi for participating in the session as a discussant. Thanks to all the lovely audience for their kind support and joining in the session. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Tanmay. Very well done.
Thank you,
And
Tanmay.
Dr. Sunita.